I'm here today with Kunaal. Kunaal is an equity partner at Trilegal. Trilegal is the law firm in India that the big guys, when they want to enter the market, they go for, considering your experience, track record, and so on. So the big investors are always there, and that's why I invite you for this conversation, because we are here in Paris trying to understand what is in the global investors' minds. What are they thinking when it comes to India, or what are the questions they have in mind? And you have had 2 days of a lot of meetings here.
Yeah.
First of all, what's your first impression about what's going on here in Europe? We have almost 800 participants here in Paris discussing situation in Europe, but also opening their eyes for India. What are your considerations?
No, thanks, Gustavo, for this. Let me briefly speak about Trilegal.
Sure.
So Trilegal is an Indian law firm. Currently, we are amongst the largest law firms in the country. It's 130 partners and maybe 1,200 lawyers. And from a sector's perspective, we are across different sectors. And it's a full-service law firm. So that's very, very briefly about the firm itself. I'm a part of the real estate group. So I do work in different aspects of real estate, M&A and real estate, debt deals, core real estate, and litigation. To answer your question about my perceptions after these 2 days in Europe, I've been attending different sessions and speaking to people. One thing that I sense, even compared to last year when I was just in Europe generally traveling, is that people were fairly pessimistic. This year, I sense cautious optimism, where people are expecting things to get better, not just in the real estate industry, but the economy as a whole. With different parts and different countries in Europe probably having slightly different views. If I may now just focus on India, India is very different. There is an aggressive optimism in the country. And the expectation is that we will grow and we will be close to the top 1, 2, 3 countries from a GDP perspective. And it's a matter of time rather than if or not, right? So it's more aggressive optimism, and that's how I would look at it.
Now let's talk about the perception of the global investors that are looking at India at the moment. Sure. Those that are not there. We were just talking here before that some of them, they still have the concept of the India of 10, 15 years ago in mind. But a considerable change had happened in the industry, in the real estate industry, and in the country as well. What can you explain? Because this video goes to thousands of members from all over the world. And being very honest and transparent about India, what's your saying? Because, and I say that because I have witnessed myself being in India since 2010, how much the country has changed throughout the years. But as a leading law firm in India and being part of so many transactions for so many years, what can you tell us with more details?
No, sure, that's a very good question. Let me first start with, the macro level issues, right? So politically, the perceptions about India probably prior to 2014, right? But that, yeah, sure, at some stage India will grow. At some stage it will be close to the largest economies in the world. But there are many challenges that you would face in India. Some of those challenges were identifying the right local partners, understanding the regulatory quagmire because there are so many regulations, and also navigating through the cultural differences that you would find in Europe or US or Canada as opposed to India. And of course we've been in practice for now over 20 years, right? So we've seen that change which has come through. Those are all right perceptions at that point of time. But if I take the last 10 years, 2014 to 2024, there's been a sea change. So if you come to India, just in terms of even the perception about cities, they're very different. I'll give you a very simple example. When I land, we're sitting in Paris currently. When I land at the airport seems old to me, right? Some parts seem like they've been built 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Of course, there are some parts which are more modern. In India, when you land at any of our large airports, they are the best in class, right? They are equivalent to a Dubai or a Singapore. That is not true just about the large airports, but also about some of the smaller city airports. Sure. So because we are a growing country, and I often tell people you can invest capital in India for the next 150 years, and we will still need more capital because that's the amount of growth that we have to, that's the amount of growth that we require, right? So it's now far more simple to come into India. There are single window clearances, at least as far as real estate is concerned. India is very welcoming of foreign capital because they're aware that to grow, we not only need domestic capital, but we also require large foreign capital. And infrastructure and real estate perhaps are the core industries that we want growth in. So roads are much better now in India, but they can improve. Railways are something that we need to work a lot harder, right? So for instance, we've been trying to get a high-speed train for the past 25 years. We still don't have one. There's no reason we should not have one with the kind of railway system that we should have. But that should happen. And in the real estate sector specifically, there is a lot of potential across all asset classes. So whether you're a debt investor or an equity investor, please look at India with a new lens, not the lens that you saw it in maybe 10 years ago or 12 years ago, because things are changing and things are improving for the better.
Yeah, I think the data that we can see coming from the region speak by itself, and it makes sense to sit down and have a clear conversation and understand, especially when you look at the more matured markets.
Yeah.
The opportunities are smaller, and at certain point, I think a lot of players will end up having to look outside of the current box.
So even in terms of the more mature markets, let me take the two biggest ones, right? United States and China, right? United States right now has a big issue as to who's going to be in the government next and what are going to be the policies. China, of course, is in some ways a closed door, and their policies have only made it more difficult to attract foreign investors. India, in that sense, is a flawed democracy, but it's a predictable flawed democracy. So there will never be large ticket changes. Power will always transfer peacefully, and even if there is a change in government, it will happen peacefully. And what you see now will only improve. It's not going to become worse off. So if you take a bet on India right now, even compared to the most developed markets, and I'm taking China and the United States as an example, the ability to make money and to get windfall gains is massive. So you should certainly look at it. You know, it would be foolhardy to not look at India as an investment destination.
And when it comes to exiting their investments, we have the case of Blackstone and Brookfield, who have exited recently and have committed to deploy more capital in the region. That's not an issue for a foreign investor.
I'm so glad you asked that question. When I was meeting foreigners in 2013, somebody had used the example of it's like getting into Alibaba's black cave, where if you get in, you're never going to be able to get out. That's absolutely not true in India. In fact, you find domestic investors who are ready to purchase from foreign investors like a Blackstone or a GIC. Very often it's the promoters whom they've tied up with. And if not, public markets give you a very good exit. And if you look at the Indian stock exchange right now, the overall value of trades in the Indian stock exchange is more than Europe as a whole, just to give you a sense. So your simplest exit is to go public, and you can exit in the public market. Simply because of the population, the retail investor base is so high. So it pretty much doesn't matter what industry you're in. Real estate, of course, is a hard asset and you have something to back it with. But exits are happening and they've become far more smoother. Personally, I've been involved in 10 exits over the past 2 years.
Fantastic. Now, a hard question here. Not everything is easy, right?
Yeah.
And when I speak to foreign investors in New York, in London, and I mention India, some of them bring to me the question about corruption.
Sure.
Which is something that in any economy can happen. But do you see any change in terms of corruption? Can we say that things got better when it comes to corruption as well?
No, absolutely. This is a very valid question because this is a common perception about doing business in India. I think the current government and Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister, has taken this head on, right? So in the past 10 years, if you ask for one issue that he has been most sensitive to tackle, that is corruption and the perception of corruption in the country. Now, that doesn't mean it's completely gone away. That's not true. But at the higher levels, at the central level, I can say it's zero, right?
Fantastic.
You cannot get anything done by paying money. It'll only happen because you're trying to do the right thing at the central government level. At the state government, I would say it's a mixed response. You will still not be able to get a result different from what the law allows. What you will be, perhaps in some cases, have the ability is you can speeden up the process and we'd call it liaisoning money or speed money, if you give that sort of money. But that's also, if I had to give percentages, that's probably 20% and not more than that. But if you're ready to wait and ready to go through the standard legal process, you don't even need to do that. Of course, lower level corruption in the context of having to bribe a traffic cop, perhaps it's there everywhere in the world. It still exists in India. The other big systemic change that has been made is everything in India is digitized. So if I have to make an application for an approval, it's online. It's a standard process. I don't know who the application is going to. It's going to a particular authority, but there is no face that I take. So there is no interface or conversation to be able to have to encourage corruption. And the answer also comes digitally. So I think the digital revolution is the biggest change in India, which has tackled corruption and also which has created a greater deal of equality in the country. So the maximum number of new billionaires come out of India, but at the same time, we have a large amount of population which is the same poverty levels as sub-Saharan Africa. But digitization is perhaps the one change which is which is making the country more equal. So whether it's a billionaire sitting in Mumbai or New Delhi, or whether it's somebody in a rural village, they have the same access to data on their smartphones as anybody else in the world does.
And transparency leads to less corruption.
Exactly.
And that makes sense a lot.
Yeah.
Now, final question here. If we have a member watching this interview and saying, you know what, maybe I should look into India, I would say, well, take a plane and go to the India GRI where you can meet everybody in one trip. So it's an easy way for you to start understanding the market. But I would ask you, what would be the two most important things he should do, or what mistakes he should avoid to do well in the country?
No, so I mean, I would echo that statement. First, visit the India GRI because you'll be able to meet a lot of people in one seminar, and a lot of important people who are decision makers, not people who are in the event just for being in the event. So I think that's a helpful start. But other than that, I would say two things. It is very important to visit India to be able to get a sense of to get a pulse of what is happening, because information that is there in the Western media broadly about what is happening in the country is often colored. So please do come to India. The other thing is start small. Don't have, unless of course you're an Amazon or a Google, you don't start small anywhere. But if you're interested in
Private equity investor,
a private equity investor or a debt fund, right? Start small. Be very careful as to whom you tie up with, because your first investment will dictate what your progress in the country is. So be careful whom you tie up with, get the right advisors, whether it's lawyers or whether it's the big four chartered accountancy firms or other consultancy firms. They can help you make introductions and also help you understand the market. But visit the country, have some sort of a setup in the country, and start small is what I would say.
Perfect. Kunal, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.